You know, in most countries, the government is terrified of criminals. But in the Soviet Union, criminals were absolutely terrified of the government because, well, the government was literally the most dangerous thing around. Welcome to our explainer on the institutional history of the KGB. Today, we aren't just looking at your average spy agency. We are looking at an organization that essentially was the Soviet Union. And we're going to explore this by opening up the ultimate Lubyanka training manual. You are going to step right into its pages and live through every single rank of this terrifying machine, from a frightened new recruit all the way up to the chairman's office. Let's dive in. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to understand the scale. At its peak, the KGB didn't just watch the Soviet Union, they were the Soviet Union. We are talking about an absolute institutional behemoth here. 480,000 officers, millions of informants. They had tentacles reaching into literally every apartment building, workplace, and church. It is a terrifying scale. So this explainer is going to be your immersive journey into the psychological conditioning and honestly, the massive moral compromises required to survive inside this exact machine.
All right, let's open the manual and trace the exact career ladder you're about to climb. We'll start with Rule 1, absolute silence. Then move into the art of detachment, navigate the inner circle, witness the empire's final days, and finally, look at new uniforms, same machine.
Part 1. Rule 1. Absolute silence.
Okay, picture this. Place yourself in Moscow, 1965. You're 20 years old, sitting in a university classroom, and you have never, ever questioned the state. Well, that careful silence? That is exactly what they noticed. A professor keeps you after class. Only, surprise, he isn't actually a professor. 3 months later, you're quietly invited to train with the KGB. And before you even start, they run background checks going back 2 full generations. From that exact moment, your old life is just a cover story. The KGB absorbs you entirely. And your silence? That becomes your ultimate survival tool. The training is brutal, not just physically, but mentally. They actively study if you can lie convincingly to someone looking directly into your eyes. You pass, but there is no big graduation ceremony, just a new identity document.
Now, you might expect a life of glamorous foreign espionage, right? Shaken martinis and secret codes. But your reality is deeply, deeply unglamorous domestic surveillance. You sit in cramped rooms, listening to bugs planted inside apartment walls. You steam open mail. You literally monitor your own neighbors. You file a report on a professor who criticized Khrushchev, and a week later he's just gone. The psychological toll of this is immense. To survive the wild contradiction of this domestic surveillance in your own personal identity, you basically have to learn to stop seeing people as humans. To you, they become files. They become threat assessments.
Moving on to Part 2, the art of detachment, hunting weakness.
Eventually, your superiors start to notice that you see things other people miss, so you get promoted to field agent, operating outside Soviet borders. Maybe you're in East Berlin. Your real job now is hunting for human weakness, and you use a very specific framework for this, MICE. That stands for money, ideology, compromise, and ego. These are the 4 levers of betrayal. You become an absolute expert at finding exactly which one applies to a target. For example, you find a West German defense clerk who is just drowning in gambling debts. You pull that money thread, and boom, he passes you classified documents for 3 years.
But here is the thing you really need to understand. The greatest skill in this line of work wasn't courage, it was detachment. Because when that West German clerk is eventually caught, and they usually are, you are already long gone with a brand new cover. Surviving the field meant using people up entirely and learning to feel absolutely nothing when they were done. That was the KGB's most dangerous creation, honestly. Ordinary people who just learned to stop feeling.
Which brings us to Part 3, navigating the inner circle, internal politics.
So after years in the field, you return to the legendary Lubyanka building as a senior officer. You're now supervising field operations from headquarters. But you quickly learn that the real terror here isn't enemy intelligence, it's internal Soviet politics. Let's say you write a totally honest assessment of a failing operation in Afghanistan. Your superior, who is terrified of delivering bad news, softens it. By the time that report actually reaches the Politburo, it is an absolute lie. The institution basically demands that everyone manages everyone else's perceptions. And this internal political reality directly impacts operational methods. It results in catastrophic decisions, simply because everyone learns to fear the truth that nobody wants to hear.
Despite all this chaos, you continue to rise. Let's fast forward to Washington, D.C. in 1978.
You are now the resident. That means you're the most powerful KGB officer in the United States. You sit in the Soviet embassy, perfectly aware that the CIA knows exactly who you are. Your job is just this constant, high-stakes performance. You have to project total, unwavering control to your superiors back in Moscow, while quietly managing the absolute chaos of the FBI's counterintelligence division, who are actively hunting your people on the ground. The internal pressure is just relentless. You haven't slept properly in months.
Part 4. The Empire's Final Days. The Shifting Ground.
By 1985, you're back in Moscow as a department chief, navigating some seriously vicious internal politics. But the ground beneath you is fundamentally shifting. Gorbachev is suddenly talking about glasnost, openness. When a junior officer nervously asks what you think of these new changes, you give a very careful answer. I think that we serve the state, whatever the state becomes. These new policies make the old KGB men deeply, deeply uncomfortable. At this elite level, you realize the agency's greatest enemy was actually never the CIA. It was time, and time was winning.
And then you finally get the call. You are now the chairman of the KGB. You command the largest intelligence apparatus on Earth. But all the old certainties are crumbling. Truth is literally destroying the USSR. On August 22, 1991, right after a failed coup, massive crowds gather directly below your window at the Lubyanka. They topple the statue of your agency's founder, Felix Dzerzhinsky, and you just watch, completely helplessly. The man who built his entire life on controlling information can do absolutely nothing to stop an idea whose time had come. By November, the KGB is dissolved.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5. New uniforms, same machine.
Now, while the KGB officially ceased to exist with a signature in November 1991, the culture definitely did not. That deep institutional memory and that intense psychological conditioning we talked about, it remained entirely intact. The massive agency simply split its functions. Domestic surveillance became the FSP, and foreign intelligence became the SVR. Thousands of officers literally just transferred to new desks. To put that into perspective, a young lieutenant colonel who joined as a junior operative back in 1975 rose quietly through this exact system. His name? Vladimir Putin. By the year 2000, he was president of Russia.
So if you really want to understand national security today, if you want to know who controls the modern world and why certain truths remain buried, you absolutely must understand this unbroken legacy. The transition to modern agencies reshaped national security on paper, sure, but the institutional foundation remained exactly the same. The KGB is officially gone, but as you can see, some institutions don't end, they just change their uniform.
We've just walked through an incredibly suffocating journey today. You basically lived an entire career inside the pages of this training manual, navigating the most powerful secret police organization in history. So I have to ask, which rank would have broken you? Would it be the quiet horrors of being a junior operative? The cold, calculated detachment of a field agent? Or maybe the crushing political lies of the inner circle? Take a second to really reflect on that immense psychological weight. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we dive into another fascinating topic.